Hi guys, I'm Jason.
I'm a teen.
And welcome to the Elevated Convo podcast. On this podcast, we look at contemporary problems through a spiritual lens. We do that by pulling from many, many different religious texts all throughout history, contemporary texts, secular texts, you name it. And we every episode have a listener submitted question. Today's listener submitted question comes from Shira. She is asking us about sort of reactivity, non-judgment, detachment, whatever you want to call it. She's thinking through the sort of importance that it plays, how we can cultivate it, why we should cultivate it. And we're going to talk through that topic. We're going to bring in a bunch of different quotes from various religions, and we're going to talk about, how we can sort of cultivate this within our lives. We're about to get into all that. Mateen, why don't you start by reading the question?
All right, so this is from Shira. One topic I've been thinking about recently is reactivity. We are reactive as humans when something annoys us, upsets, or frustrates us. It's a natural instinct, but it's important to learn how not to choose to be reactive, since the world would be a much nicer place if more people did that. You have no control if you're reactive. You are letting others control you. I'm definitely far from perfect, but someone hit my car a couple of years ago, and I was very calm because there was no reason to expend my energy on being upset. Much worse things have happened. It was already done. It was an accident, and no one was hurt. The guy who hit me was surprised and said, "Why are you being so cool about this?" I shrugged and said, "Things happen." He looked very surprised, when I think shows how few people would have reacted in that manner. What would I have gained from being upset? How I would have felt bad and wasted energy and made that guy feel worse and waste energy too. What do you two think about this topic?
Well, thank you, first of all, Shira, for writing in. We appreciate it. I think this topic is massively important. Is my long story short, I think that when it comes to my personal peace, as it were, like non-reactivity, non-judgment. I mean, I'm certainly not saying I'm perfect. I'm certainly not perfect, but I've tried to cultivate as much of it as I can throughout the years, particularly the last few years. And it's amazing what it can do for you. And this is like such a vast topic within all these different religious traditions. I have like tons of quotes to share today, probably more quotes on this topic than I've had on any other topic we've done so far, just because there's so many, and they're all throughout different religious texts. Actually, one of the ones that came up is one that we've talked about before on this show for a different episode, is Proverbs 16:32. This came up in the masculinity episode, but it's relevant here as well. Better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. Similarly, in James 1:19 says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Even right off the bat, we're seeing the importance that this plays.
There's also, it's just showing how how relatable each religion really is. Again, this idea of progressive revelation, of every manifestation of God, every prophet was sent down for that time and place. The message is quite the same, just translated in different times and different generations. There was a quote by Baha'u'llah, which is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. And both of us are Baha'is, so we have sort of lived and breathed these quotes throughout our lives. Baha'u'llah writes, "Possess a pure and kindly and radiant heart, that thine may be sovereignty ancient, let me read that again. This is a quote by Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith. He writes, "Possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that thine may be a sovereignty ancient, imperishable, and everlasting." What are your thoughts on that quote and the one you just read?
Yeah. I love that quote in particular. Possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart. To me, that's sort of like, it's as if like that is like the key, that is like the crux of of everything. Like without a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, what do you have? If you sort of think of the world negatively, and what will become of you? We did a episode on manifestation early on, and this idea that there are these kind of like new agey type beliefs, but they're not actually that different than what we find in religious texts. The idea that, you know, kind of your outlook on the world is, you know, sort of becomes your reality. There's even some like sort of, you know, scientific evidence on that. But in regards to the quote that you shared by Baha'u'llah, like that, I think is why it's so important, because, you know, if we have this pure, kindly, and radiant heart, then I think, you know, we sort of receive that energy. We broadcast that energy and we receive that energy. Whereas if we look at the world in a judgmental way, if we have tension, if we're sort of white knuckled as we go throughout the world, then I think that's what we get back. I also believe that we are, like, you know, put on this earth to sort of grow spiritually, to develop virtues, to develop qualities. And one of the reasons, perhaps, like, I don't know if, you know, anyone can relate that's listening, but I feel like there are some people, whether it's, you know, in popular culture or also just in your personal life, where it's like everything seemingly always goes wrong for them. And like, you know, they, no matter what, like there's just always, you know, something going wrong in their life. And unfortunately, oftentimes these people are sort of like very kind of like upset. They're white knuckled. They are reactive. They're not non-judgmental. And, you know, I don't know, it's not my place to say, but like, I wonder sometimes, you know, maybe this person is meant to sort of learn a lesson, and maybe the lesson they're meant to learn is non-reactivity. You know, like they're trying to sort of like, I don't know, beat the world into submission. Maybe they're angry at the world. They're like I said, they're white knuckled. But instead, like, you know, once they discover this sort of secret, not so secret, if you look in religious texts, of non-reactivity, things become much, much easier. Yeah, there's so many more quotes I have to share, but do you have any thoughts before we keep going?
Yeah, I again, like this idea of non-reactivity, and it really comes down to like self-control, not letting our ego sort of get crazy and say this idea of like, why me? You know, what, this should have never happened to me kind of attitude. And I want to be very clear, like being non-reactive doesn't mean that you're passive. Being detached doesn't mean that there's indifference. Being calm doesn't mean weakness. A lot of times, like the car accident example, it's like you get into a car accident, like, and it was the other person's fault. We're immediately kind of jumping into like, I have the right to be angry. I have the right to be reactive. And we should kind of look at this from that perspective of that Baha'i faith lens of saying like, you know, freedom from being owned by outcomes, not allowing other anger or the energy that they throw on you to sort of, for you to swallow that up. You know, like be kind, be radiant. Don't let the outside world condition you to react in a certain way when you're not that type of person.
Yeah. You know, one topic that I think has come up routinely on this show is the idea of like, you know, sort of two concepts, maybe of slightly different name, ultimately pointing toward the same truth. You know, like for example, on the manifestation episode, we talked about how, you know, some people sort of outside of the, you know, guise of religion have this idea that if I put a sort of intention out there and I ask the universe for it, the universe will give it to me. Well, you know, like we talked about how that sounds a lot like prayer, and it's like these two sort of different things ultimately point toward the same truth. I think the same thing is true here. This concept that Shira is getting at can be, you know, labeled as non-reactivity or non-judgment, detachment. I also think it can be labeled as reliance on God. You know, like depending on your religious perspective, that, you know, is perhaps what's at the core of this. You know, there's a quote from the Bible. It's Philippians 4:6-7. Paul is writing this from prison at the time. He says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present all your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." And, you know, what's interesting, like he's writing this from prison, like he's lived this, you know, like he's like to sort of be a prisoner at the time and to be at peace, you know, I think really sort of puts extra weight on this quote that Paul wrote. You additionally, we find it in Buddhism and in Hinduism. So, in the Dhammapada, it says, just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, so the wise are not moved by praise or blame. And then similarly in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, he who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires attains peace. I think it's, not to be redundant, but one of the things I say often on the show, one of the reasons why we made the show is because we think there's so much wisdom in these, ancient texts. People our age perhaps, discount the wisdom that lies within religion. But I think that when you find this wisdom, particularly like strewn throughout humanity's history, throughout different ages, different populations, surely there's something to it. There's a reason why, right, this message has been so consistent throughout the years. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like people who are like, speaking of perspective, like are spiritually grounded and are sort of follow some sort of higher ground perspective are calmer in life.
Yeah,
they're less angry. There's a quote by Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the Prophet founder, Baha'u'llah, of the Baha'i faith. He says that if any man be ill-natured, show him kindness. If he be unjust, show him justice. If he be angry, show him love. And then like literally, let's go back like 1,000 years to Islam by Prophet Muhammad. He says, the strong person is not the one who overcomes others by force, but the one who controls himself while in anger.
Right.
Again, another example of like, when we're angry, we tend to just spew things and language and actions towards someone that may not even deserve it. And we may not even be that person that we're spewing anger out of. Like we come back to like, that was me, that I did that,
Right.
And so, we hold on to a lot of anger, and then we wonder why we're so stressed in life. We wonder why we're so like, people will be like, wow, you've changed. Something happened to you, so it's like, we tend to like, we're not vulnerable enough in our society.
Yeah.
We tend to just hold on to everything and then expect people to read our minds when things go wrong.
Yeah. And, I think it's important to remember that anger, negativity is contagious. Easy for us to forget, but like if you, I don't know, give someone a sour look, if they like cut you off or for whatever happens, then that can spread, that person, like maybe the rest of their drive, they're sort of thinking, oh, like that guy, what a fill in the blank, and then like they get to work or they get back from work and they kind of, have that anger still in their head, and maybe they like, inadvertently take it out on whoever's nearby. And similarly, like positivity is contagious. I know it sounds cheesy. It sounds like something you'd find on like a, fortune cookie or something, but it's true. In the same way, if you sort of, share a smile with a stranger in line or whatever, like it really is contagious.
Very contagious.
There's this idea in the Baha'i faith of this sort of twofold moral purpose, the idea that like you can improve yourself and society at the same time. I think the same thing is true here, like the gift of non-reactivity, the skill of non-judgment, whatever you want to call it. It's an amazing, amazing thing for yourself. It's so transformational. And it also has the benefit of benefiting those around you. Like you get to spread that positivity. You don't get to be bogged down by the chore of judging others.
And there's also research, there's the idea that like neuroscience, calm responses come from like the prefrontal cortex, even pausing, like if you're angry, like the car accident or something even worse happens to you, and just pausing and reflecting for a few seconds before jumping out.
Sure.
And a lot of that shifts back to reason, like we go back like, oh, maybe that probably isn't the smart thing to do.
Yeah.
There's also the psychology. I mentioned this earlier, like studies have shown that emotionally regulated people have to deal with like less stress. They have better relationships, and they make better long-term decisions.
Of course.
And then at the end of the day, like anybody knows this, like when you have anger towards anyone, even you're internally, you feel more drained. Resentment causes draining. Calmness is you need to preserve that. And we only have like a limited amount of energy. And so much of that energy goes to, helping other people, helping family members. And so that a lot of times the energy that we are left for ourselves is so minimal.
Right.
Why throw that at someone else that really that energy could have kept for yourself.
Yeah.
We need to, as a society and even ourselves, really regulate our emotions.
Completely. I mean, I'm glad you brought up this idea of energy because, like you said, our energy is finite. And I think that a lot of people nowadays, unfortunately, they devote a lot of energy towards this judgment. Like in this country, for instance, we are so polarized, right? Oh, yeah. And I think that a lot of people walk around, constantly throughout the day thinking like, this group of people is so messed up, and like putting politics aside, it weighs on you. It's such a parasitic force in your life, to have that eating away at you all the time, and to like it becomes, maybe it starts good natured enough where like you see something in the news that upsets you and you think, how dare this whoever do this, whatever it may be. But then, if you walk around with that judgment all the time, it begins to become the lens through which you see the world. And, you're sort of quick to snap judge others. We certainly see this in terms of politics and polarization. People walk around with this lens so much that it's very quickly you're either with us or you're against us. In, this country, it's the left or the right. It's okay. You're either, on my team, you're on the opposite team, whatever it happens to be. But, an interesting thing happens when you have belief in a higher power. You have belief in an all-knowing God and a just God. It's this release from judgment, and it's such a powerful thing. This is something that I wish I could put into better words for my friends that aren't religious, but it is one of the best benefits I would say that I get from, my religious belief, purely selfishly. It just helps me sleep at night. The idea that I believe in a God that is, just. And if I see injustice throughout the world, it's not that I'm meant to turn a blind eye. I'm still, I believe, meant to sort of, care about these issues and not be ignorant towards them. But it's that belief that if justice does not find a perpetrator of a bad act in this world, it comes for them, wherever we go after we die, the next world, so to speak, the afterlife, whatever you want to call it. That when you truly internalize that, then you just get released from this chore of judging people. You don't have to keep track of this person wronged me and that person I have a thing against, and I can't believe this person did that. You don't have to keep track. You can let go. You can trust in God to distribute justice, from the ultimate perspective, from the omniscient perspective. And you get to release all that baggage, that parasitic drag, all of a sudden you have so much energy left in your life. It really is a transformational thing.
Yeah, I mean, the concept you're using, and if you hadn't already said it, is this idea of detachment.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, putting your ego away, reliance on a God, on a higher power, seeing events without attaching an identity to them, as you mentioned we all like to do in our society today, accepting reality as it is, not as you wish it were. And that's really important here. And also freedom from being owned by the outcomes, just accepting it and hoping that through prayer, through reliance of God, and through this idea of really selflessness, putting others before yourself. And what that means, putting others before yourself, is not to shame them either, really, truly, their feelings, their emotions, it's a completely new way of thinking, not being selfish. There's some things that you need to be, when it comes to your own health and your own priorities, that's very important, but not to be engaged with what society deems as right, as you need to be angry. You want something changed, you need to force your way. That's just not how it is. And that may work, again, at the short term. I really believe it can work, but it doesn't quench the hearts of the people.
Yeah.
It doesn't, as you mentioned, at your airport and you smile at someone, that's what they leave with.
Right.
They may forget about all the other negative things that have happened to them, but they leave with that thing of that. There's a person that I didn't know smiled at me at the airport and felt like I was there.
Yeah.
They recognized me as a soul. Right. And that's very important.
Completely. Yeah. Detachment is so important. Non-judgment is so important. even today, right now, Mateen is practicing non-judgment, against this shirt that I'm wearing.
I'm not going to say anything. Who bought you that shirt?
Yeah, exactly. But on the subject of detachment, there's a quote by Baha'u'llah. Detachment is as the sun, in whatsoever heart it doth shine, it quencheth the fire of covetousness and self. Like the idea that these forces, within us, covetousness and self, it's something that I'm constantly trying to tame within me, my selfish desires, my ego, whatever word you want to use. And the idea that detachment being this sun and like it sort of like clears all that stuff out. You shine like a bright light on a dark corner and like everything sort of scatters and it just, same thing with this quencheth the fire, it just, that burning fire of ego, it quencheth it. I think that once again, there's a reason why it is such a motif. It's such a common theme in all these different religions. I also have from the Torah, Ecclesiastes 7:9, do not be quick to anger, for anger rests in the lap of fools. Another excellent, just to Shira's point about the car crash, like if she, got angry after the car crash. I love her perspective. I didn't mention this earlier, but just, really. Just like, well, it's already happened. It's already done.
Yeah.
Like she literally said, like, what would getting angry do? Like that would have wasted energy.
Yeah. I was going to give an example. It's like, I have the same attitude. I give a lot of credit to Shira because I don't know if I would be in the same place, but when it like something simple as like when I stub my toe, or like sometimes like I'm doing something and something drops out of my hand and the glass breaks and it's like, I really want to get angry. I mean, a thing inside of me, but it's always like just my fault. So it's like, what's the point of that? But like a lot of times I get really angry and I just say, Mateen, like it already happened. What am I supposed to do now?
Right.
So it's like, am I going to let it torture me for the next few hours, or am I going to just let it go and go clean up the mess?
Right.
And so I want to add, give
please.
a lot of credit to Shira. You have modeled a lot of great things that we hope to accomplish in these podcasts by the messages that we want to put out, is that the acceptance of reality, it already happened. She already mentioned that.
Yeah.
The perspective of there could have been worse things that could have happened. You could have gotten hurt and you didn't. And so that's really important. And then this third thing is like, which I think like we forget about and when it happens with somebody else, is this idea of compassion. Another really important virtue in the Baha'i faith and many other virtues in other faiths as well, is that you spared the other person an unnecessary shame. You just kind of like swallowed your pride and said, I have compassion for you and compassion for myself. And so, that's really, really important. And we, thank you for being that role model in this scenario.
Completely. Yeah. I think, as we sort of slowly begin to wrap up here, I think the main message that I would just like to, leave everyone with is, be more like Shira, I guess, in this regard. And I mentioned you find this all throughout religions. You also find it all throughout, these super popular self-help books from the past 20, 30 years. So like, The Power of Now is a great example.
Power of Now is really
Talks
good.
A lot about the same thing in A New Earth by the same author. The Four Agreements.
That's what I was going to mention.
Yeah,
yes.
Really? What were you going to say?
I read the book. I don't know the agreements that well, but go ahead. I think
the second one is take nothing personally.
Yeah.
Don't take anything personally. And that is, I think, once again, sort of this referring to this concept by a slightly different name, but it's all pointing towards the same truth. Like this non-reactivity, this non-judgment. If someone cuts you off on the way to work, like they could be, I don't know, just inconsiderate, but they could also be like on the way to the hospital or something. You have no idea. And once again, like I said, it's not necessarily our place. At least I try not to make it my place to judge others in that regard. They cut me off. Well, hopefully I'm safe. I don't have to like slam on the brakes or anything, but like, that's okay. it already happened. No reason to get mad.
Jason is probably the best person to run into on the 405. Like the person, like everyone's flicking you off. He's just like, nice to see you. Hey, Shira is good, but Jason is also another great example.
No, I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means. I certainly I have tons of work to do in this regard. Yeah, I have tons of work to do in this regard. But I just think that it's no coincidence that it's so universal in terms of like you find this, like I think that so much of the self-help content, that you find out there could be distilled down into this.
Yeah.
The reason I think people focus on meditation so much is because when you meditate, you're asked to sort of non-judgmentally examine the things in your life. And you often find that you're perhaps making a mountain out of a molehill. This sort of like judgment that you're holding on to, once again, just like that white knuckled grip really is sort of the imagery in my head. Is it like justified, that, judgment that you have over a person or a thing in your life or whatever it may be? Through meditation, I think we oftentimes find the answer is no. Or even if there is, some like necessary reason, once again, like I mentioned, this idea of non-judgment doesn't mean we're meant to be ignorant, or we're meant to like sort of, if someone's like, I don't know, like abusing you or punching you or something, you're not be like, oh, I'm non-judgmental.
Just turn the cheek.
Yeah, exactly. No, certainly not. But when you do have to sort of take action, you do it from a more mindful place. You do it from a more detached place. You're like, okay, like just sort of objectively, you decide, okay, this is the action I'm going to take. Do you have
I have some closing thoughts. I mean, again, Ashira, I feel like you have hit most of the points that we were basically talking about, but for everybody else that's listening, there's a few things that I would say, some important tips from being less reactive. Name the emotion before you act. Right? Like tiny pause between the trigger and the reaction really puts you into place of like, who do you want to be? Slow the body, calm the mind. A really helpful, important tip I've done is like relax the jaw.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Relax the
we
jaw,
carry a lot of tension in our jaws.
A lot of tension, so you can just open that up a little bit and just like, it really does help out.
Right.
Protect your energy because it's a very valuable resource, and treat energy like money. You only got $20 in your pocket. Like every, time you do something, that's like $5 out of your pocket.
Interesting.
And then anchor to something higher, this higher power, God. Not just, the idea of like it's not just what you feel is justified. It may be, and it may be feel satisfying to engage in that activity.
Sure.
A lot of times this may happen even on social media because you don't get to see the person. So you just want to comment and you're like, I'm really angry and I'm going to say, okay, calm down. Again, it doesn't make that much of a difference. What really matters more is preserving unity and reflecting your own dignity.
Right.
Not just the unity of your own like brain and your calmness, but the people around you. At the end of the day, we want to make the world a better place. It starts by you.
Of course.
So
yeah. Thank you, Shira, for writing in. Thank you for modeling this behavior. We appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. We hope you enjoyed. In case you're not aware, this podcast is very young. We're just sort of getting our footing, as it were. And if you enjoyed, the number one thing you can do to support is to share it with a friend. We would really, really appreciate that. We'd be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below if you have more thoughts on this topic. And if there's another topic you would like us to talk through on the show, you'll find a link in the description to a Google form. You can also DM us on Instagram. And we'd love to hear what you guys would like to talk about.
Yeah, there's a plethora of things that we can discuss and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.